Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Senator Todd Weiler and former Utah Democratic Party Chair Jeff Merchant. Gentlemen, great to have both of you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn.
Let's dig into first the party chair position. Jeff, something you know firsthand pretty well, but we saw the Utah GOP chair, Carson Jorgenson, announced he will not seek another term after serving only one term. And on his way out, he says dishonesty and disloyalty seem to be the traded currency in politics. Senator Weiler, let's start with you since it's your party. What do we make of this?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what Carson's referring to. I like Carson. I think he's done a good job as chair. There's, I don't agree with everything he's ever said, but that hasn't been my experience in Utah politics. I think that there is some backstabbing that goes on, but I think Utahns are mostly good people trying to do their best. So I'm sad that that's been his takeaway from his 2 years as party chair.
Jeff, again, as I mentioned, this is something you know well. Talk about the party chair position and the transient nature we see really on both sides with the two major parties.
Yeah, look, this is a tough job, primarily volunteer. Some people end up getting paid, but I mean, I know that I wasn't. This is a hard thing to do, and the line that I always think of with party politics, especially as the chair, is that you get credit for nothing when it goes right, and you get blamed every time something goes wrong. So it is a really hard thing to get people to stick around for a long time. And that's been a problem that Republicans and Democrats have had in Utah for a while. I think that we could solve some of our party problems if we kind of stuck with specific people for a longer period of time. But I think that there are some fundamentals that are going to have to change to make that a reality in a place like Utah.
Senator, does it harm a party when we see so much turnover like we have, especially over the last several years in the Utah GOP?
Yeah, I don't know that it harms the party. I think it's nice to have volunteers step up. I'll tell you, on the Republican side, up until Governor Huntsman, we usually had a U.S. senator or a governor asking someone to run for party chair, and Huntsman kind of ended that practice. And quite frankly, it's kind of been hit or miss since then. I understand the delegates get to choose, but I do think it helps if the party chair is closely aligned with the governor or the next U.S. senator up for re-election.
Jeff, you had mentioned before we started this segment that in other states you see party chairs with a longer stay in office. What do you make of that when you compare it to what we see here?
Yeah, I really do think that having longer tenure is a good thing for a party. It provides a lot of stability. And at the end of the day, the party's primary roles are raising money. It's investing in data and investing in people. And when you have every 2 years a new chair come in, I mean, Jorgensen's a good example of getting rid of most of the Republican staff. I think that what you see is that the people that are making the day today move forward in the party, when they get replaced every couple of years, you have no institutional memory and no long-term vision or plan. So having one person in for an extended period of time, I think, is only beneficial to a party.
Let's move on to the legislative session. Senator, how do you assess the job you and your colleagues did up on the Hill this year?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of critics for the legislature. I think it was a good session, probably one of the best sessions I've been involved with. Historic tax cuts, historic increases in education funding and teacher salaries, another $500 million to try to save the Great Salt Lake. I think those were some of the highlights. As a state, there's probably a few misses. I know some people are disappointed we didn't take up the clergy exemption with, with sex offenders and things like that. But, that's a privilege that's been around for thousands of years. And I think there's good arguments on both sides of that.
Jeff, let's hear your assessment.
Hey, I think it was Mark Twain who said, "No man's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature's in session." So, frankly, I'm just glad that it's over. Certainly the legislature's done a lot of work. I think that there was a lot of things that could have been done that weren't done. I think that there's a lot more work that could have been done with water and the Great Salt Lake. There's certainly a lot of air issues that probably could have been addressed. And then certainly we got distracted by a number of issues that really, in my mind, don't seem to raise to the level of time that was spent on them. But overall, at least it was only 45 days.
There's been some talk about the makeup of this legislature shifting to the right. Senator, do you believe that's the case, and what did you see?
Well, in the Senate, all of the Republicans came back, and so I haven't seen that in the Senate.
Yeah, mostly in the House.
Yeah, in the House we had, about over 15 freshmen, and I do think a lot of the new replacements were younger and more conservative than the people they replaced. A good example of that is Steve Handy and Trevor Lee. So I think there's some truth to that.
Your thoughts on that, Jeff, and what impact did it have this session?
Yeah, look, it was a 20% turnover. We lost two very moderate Democrats that I think represented Salt Lake County very well. And they were replaced, along with a number of other moderate Republicans, with people that are more interested in national politics and further right-leaning ideas and concepts. And I don't think that really helps when we're trying to deal with really, really big issues that we've been dealing with for 30 or 40 years and still haven't been able to solve. So again, I think that there was a lot of distraction that didn't need to happen, that occurred probably as a result of some of these individuals who were newly elected.
Senator, your thoughts on what Jeff says are distractions and what others say were message bills or cultural war bills?
Well, I think that some of these social issues are things that people care about on both sides of the aisle, and I would rather deal with them at the state level than have Congress try to dictate everything to us. I do think that some of the more extremist ideas on both sides of the aisle were either watered down or did not pass, which is what usually happens in the Utah legislative sessions.
We saw this year the legislature really jump off the bat right in the beginning. We saw two really highly debated bills get passed in the first 2 weeks. Jeff, what did you make of that strategy we saw from the legislature this year?
I think that it probably was a good idea to get some of those big issues out in front and try and get them resolved. As we know, a lot of bills end up getting final passage at the very last minute. And I think that, whether you liked those bills or didn't like those bills, it was very smart to address those at the front end. So they had plenty of time in case issues came up. And as we know, sure, the Republicans have a supermajority. That does not mean that things pass very quickly or very easily. And I think that it was probably a good strategy for them to start with some of their top priorities early on.
Senator, your thoughts on that? The president and speaker making no bones about it that would be the strategy going into this session.
Yeah, we did the same thing last year with some of the COVID bills that were divisive. Over 90% of our bills are pretty much bipartisan supported. And so, it's kind of the strategy, do you rip off the Band-Aid slow or do you do it fast? And the voucher bill and the transgender health bill, those were divisive bills, and they decided to rip off the Band-Aid fast. And I don't fault them for it. They got criticized for doing the transgender sports bill on the last day of the session last year, and then they get criticized for doing, controversial things in the first 2 weeks. If people don't like the policy, they're always going to attack the procedure no matter when you do it.
Let's talk about the state flag, the new flag. That really drew a lot of attention. It was a highly debated bill on the Capitol, or on Capitol Hill as well. Were you surprised to see so many people come out and get involved in this process? And when you talk about process, this one really went on for a long time. A lot of public input went into this, Jeff.
Yeah, lots and lots of public input, lots and lots of talk and debate and discussion. And I have no idea how much money was spent on this, probably far more than it needed to be. But yeah, I think that it's good that people were involved in the process. I know that now there's talk about a referendum to repeal it. Look, I can't say that this is my favorite flag in the world, but I can't say that the old flag was my favorite flag either. So I think that the good thing about this was that people were involved. Lots of people had input. The one thing that I don't think anybody can say is that the people didn't get the opportunity to talk about it.
Senator, we have about 30 seconds left. Why did this become such a controversial issue?
Well, I think flags are symbols that people identify with. I love the new state flag. I think people will warm up to it. I'm not certain that the referendum will get enough signatures, but if it does, I think that's great advertisement for the new flag. And change is hard for some people, but I think this is a really good move for the state of Utah.
Gentlemen, really appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for being here with us this morning.
Thanks, Glenn.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.